Vincent, Mateo, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this wonderful project in Los Angeles.
Yeah, no problem.
For having us.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about you first, about your roles at Block, and we're going to talk through this project and how it's been done a little differently from maybe how you've done projects in the past. And Mateo, let's start with you. Tell us a little about your role at Block and what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, so I'm Mateo, and I'm head of real estate at Block, so oversee all of our real estate decision and portfolio.
Nice. And Vincent?
I'm Vincent, head of workplace. My team does a range of things from traditional FM functions to soft services like experience and events and distributed programs.
Yeah, and you both run both these functions globally. You've got a workplace team, real estate team, and a lot of working together on these kinds of projects. So excited to hear how you both have been working together on this project. But let's start with LA. Why Los Angeles for the business? What's the importance of LA to Block?
I could start with that one. So historically, the city's always been prominent for the business, mostly for the media and entertainment industry here. It's a great pool of talent for designers and marketing teams. But during the pandemic, we pivoted from being in office to being distributed. So a physical space wasn't the priority, but investing in the market still was. I'd say for the past few years, we've just seen natural progression of people moving to LA from established markets and hiring trends coming here. So from an employee perspective, we started gathering a lot of remote employees here, but then from a business perspective, a lot of the team's partners and clients also sat in the city.
Yeah, great. And has there always been a question mark over go, no go on space in LA? Have you had to fight back the demand for a palace for everybody to convene around? What does that look like for you both around here?
Yeah, so for me, it was fielding a lot of requests from executives that want space in specific parts of the region. So when those came in, it was less about I want to accommodate the entire population there, and more so I want proximity to my business initiatives. So if you're media and entertainment, likely in Hollywood. If you're an engineer, likely in Silicon Beach. So the requests that were coming in were more to support a business initiative for a specific part of the city. And that's where the complexities came for LA. It's like, where do you pick the right spot? Because we do have significant business presence here, but for our employee base, they're scattered across the metro area.
Yeah. And Vincent, was this like a case of the haves and have-nots for you? You know, some people have a sort of built-out environment that they're going to at Block in Oakland. There's a beautiful building that you have there that you operate, and you will have invested a lot of time and effort into the experience of that building for the blockheads. That is not a derogatory term, right? That's the actual name.
Builders.
Builders. It's changed. When did that change?
Very recently.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay, right. The builders.
Yep.
So, yeah, were you kind of fielding that element as well?
Equity is definitely a common concern of ours when we think about building programs and giving people access to resources. Our portfolio over the last 4 years or so has been like in a constant state of change. So for sure, we heard, this is the largest group of employees that do not have an office resource or did not have an office resource. So there was a lot of feedback that we received around the need for one in the market. But we have seen Desana sort of as a tool to give access to similar resources to employees that are largely distributed across the globe. So that gave them access to space, was a bit of a pressure release valve from with many respects. That, and then we also looked at the experiential ends, distributed programs, specifically like local block chapters, which is opportunities for groups to self-organize and gather for some social type of engagement. So there's an LA chapter, for example, and those two things ultimately gave us the data that we were looking at to say, hey, look, this is a prime market for doing something.
Yeah. So you're already kind of thinking about how you give some kind of employee experience in markets where you didn't have core real estate. And I wonder, what the legacy way for you to consider building up into taking space might have been before we talk a little about how you've leveraged Desana and how we've ended up in this really cool building in LA and Culver City.
Yeah, so traditionally, we would have been looped in by the business. They would have informed us, we want to grow a specific initiative in that market, so we're going to hire in that specific location. And so what that would look like is that we would go and find a solution, which could be co-working space for short term to ramp up hiring, and then pivot to a long-term lease where we would build out our own space to have the same culture as our other locations. So it would have been a more lengthy process that would have been informed by hiring decisions, which was a little bit different than how we had to address this now, because people just naturally came here. We weren't hiring, so we didn't really know how many people we would need to accommodate in a space.
Yeah.
I think that the conversation also looks very different because of our distributed work policy. That kind of density, it's a very straightforward conversation for most companies. Like, oh, well, we need space to be able to support them in that market. But for us, there's always a deeper question to be asked around, well, why do we need that? Why do we need that space when people can work from anywhere? What value does that provide that people can't get in their home environment?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the evolution of this from, zero to where we are now, and then we can talk about where this might go from here, right? So we're in a reasonable size building here, but where did it start? So before even Desana was implemented, on-demand booking of space across LA, what approach did you want to take as a business here, and how is it built up and gone from on-demand to this beautiful location?
Yeah, so Vincent touched on this. Historically, we had a huge congregation of employees that sat here that were very vocal on wanting a solution. The difficulty for us was identifying where we would put that solution in the city. And we were always trying to find ways to be efficient with cost while supporting the employee experience, which is why we evolved into on-demand only in LA. We use that as a pilot for as a gauge for the rest of our portfolio on how employees would connect. And then through on-demand, Vincent's team started enabling programs like the local block chapters to deepen that connection and not just have a space. It was also programming behind it. So it emulated a similar experience to being in office, even though we didn't have one there. And then through that, we naturally progressed to, all right, we're starting to see natural trends through the employees' self-booking and spaces, how they're gathering in the local block chapters, which then helped us inform coming into more of a long-term booking and making a decision that we want a dedicated space for our employees. That dedicated space, we wanted to make sure that it actually connected our people to the company. And so we wanted to make sure that the environment wasn't sterile when we did that. And so being able to customize an experience that felt like an office was really important to us. And I think Vincent can talk on how a space like this is better suited for his team to program it and make it feel like a block space versus going into a co-working location. Yeah. Where you're just mixed with a random group of people.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little, Vincent, the importance of this being, because this is kind of pseudo block, right? It's like on its way to being full blocks, not Oakland or San Francisco yet, but it's way more, you have way more curation and control over that.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the importance of that first for this step in the decision to taking more space in LA, and what considerations there were to have more control over that than, say, a kind of a traditional co-working solution? Yeah,
sure. I think kind of the theme of what Mateo touched on there is like incrementalism, right? Like first it started off with, an employee need, experimentation with Desana, introduction of these distributed programs, learning, and then ultimately leading to this long book option. And I think that incremental approach, like you described, it's not going to be, a full-blown designed, built, Oakland or San Francisco experience, but it's going to be far greater than what you can get in a WeWork space. We have far more control over the way that we operate and program the space, and even a lot of influence over the design aspect too. So I think we've reached a happy middle ground in terms of like designing for the current moment, which is a longer term pilot. And then layering in experiential programming to try to replicate what might feel like a block office experience. To give ultimately the pilot the best chance to succeed, we need to create as close to a block-like experience as possible within the space.
Yeah. So there's been this progression then from giving on-demand access across LA. You've looked at trends and looked at the data on how people have been, voting with their feet, booking into space. There's been a workplace enablement sort of program that's ran alongside that. And that's justified where you've taken dedicated space, but you've been able to somewhat have control over the fit out, furniture, IT, the overall experience. Mateo, from a real estate perspective, that process of taking a space of this size, what would that have looked like for you? What challenges would you have run into typically, and timescales that you would have been working with to spin that up? That kind of, okay, we've got all this data and context now, right? It's now your job to go and scan the market, see what your options are. What kind of timescales and challenges would you have had? And how's this been a bit different from that?
Yeah, so from a real estate...
It's been really different.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
It is super. There's similarities where we still toured, we went to market with executives, did site selection, where the difference lied is that the negotiation was relatively seamless. What normally takes 3 months, a month for negotiation, 2 months for legal review, then we're taking possession of the space, went down to 3 weeks. And then the other difference is to open up a space at this level, it requires probably 8 to 12 months of building out so that it's at our spec. That's not just designing the space so that it's pretty, it's infrastructure like network equipment, AV equipment, security installation. All of that takes at least 12 months so that it comes out perfectly. And we were able to act within 2 months of getting into the space. So from a traditional standpoint, what would have taken at a minimum a year, we did it in 2 months. So we were able to go speed to market relatively quickly and hedge against risk that if employees don't come, we're not locked into a long-term commitment. We're able to pivot. Or if more employees come quickly, we can expand through the same program and buy us time to figure out our long-term solution here, or to go direct in the space if we really wanted to.
Yeah. And what's the commitment sort of term for this first phase of the pilot?
We view the pilot as a year-long commitment, that we want a full calendar year, just given seasonality. Employees are going to be gone during the holidays. Sometimes there's peak travel periods like the summertime. So a full calendar year allows us to view routine usage of the space. Yeah.
So it's been great to be working with you all on this project. We came to you a while back with this kind of us doing our own pilot with this Longbook product. We're still working on the name. We're still, every time we speak to people about it, the Longbook name echoes in our head as like, should really rename that, but we're stuck now. So Longbook it is. But yeah, gets the point across, which you've been able to lean on our existing MSA with the flexible workspace market. And as you say, it took potentially 3. I think you're being generous. It can take longer to get through contract negotiation sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
To a couple of weeks to get through that contract process and just aligning on commercials. So it's been great to be working with you folks to, we've been doing this at smaller scales, but this kind of scale, and it's standing up, and you being able to move and get moved in within that 3-month period is great to see. I wonder, how has speed been useful in this context? Being able to say to the business something that you would need to give us 12 months heads up, realistically on, could be now delivered in a number of weeks. How is that an advantage for you folks?
Yeah, so for us to be able to move so quickly allows the business to act or plan around us versus with us. So in the past, we would open up a space because the business had initiatives that they wanted to pursue. Now we are opening up space, allowing the business to pursue initiatives through physical space. So I think speed is a great factor. But the other thing that I want to call out that was influential is that the type of building that we took still stirred up excitement from the executives while we were touring. If we would have toured them through serviced offices, they wouldn't have had that same level of energy or commitment to the city. Not the city, but the space itself. They would have just been like, yeah, that's fine. We're going to connect people. But being able to get them into a space like this really drove that excitement. And then adding on the layer of speed to that also just gave them more energy to lean into using the physical space, not only for their business initiatives, but to bring their teams together. And then now we also can tie in the employee experience as part of that.
And yeah, you're obviously able to lean in more, Vincent, with programming of a space of this type. You're not just doing block chapter meetups. I think there's a lot more intended for your team to be facilitating. You talk a little about that and how the space is enabling that.
Yeah, just to build on that point too, I think pride and ownership is really what you get from being able to tour and enter these types of spaces where you go through a WeWork and you're getting the WeWork experience, the WeWork brand. So I think activating these spaces is a much different experience. It feels much more like a traditional office environment. We can reconfigure the space. We just did it this morning. We were moving.
We reconfigured this space many times today.
Lifting some couches, moving some things around, right? But we're able to set it up in a way that best suits the specific programs that we're putting on. That configurability is much less in a traditional WeWork environment. It doesn't feel like our space.
Yeah. It's obviously us sort of chatting through how this will be leveraged, even in the short number of months from you getting in, is incredible. So there's obviously a very different, connection with the business for you as a function to be able to move so quickly and then give them something they can really work with. But I wonder how this evolves for you folks, because you've got 1 year of commitment, which is kind of unheard of for this style of space. What kind of things are you going to be measuring to determine this is really working for us, let's lean into more space, or actually we're seeing things that mean that we might scale this back or take it in another direction? What kind of things are you going to be looking for to determine that?
We look at a lot of traditional metrics. So I think we'll look at things like utilization on a square foot basis. We look at it over Tuesday through Thursday time period, because we see generally Mondays and Fridays are somewhat outliers.
Yeah.
We also look at events volumes because we want to see teams gathering in these types of spaces. We largely believe that is what really differentiates office environments from your home environment, right? What value does this add that you can't get at home? And largely that's collaborative in nature. So we want to see events occurring here, or utilization high. Both is great. But then there's also potential for like business enablement and investment that the business is able to make for the local community and the local market. I think you mentioned speed earlier, and another thing that's interesting on that point is we've been able to show the business that we're able to move at tech-like speed. And I think that enables us to partner with them in new ways that we haven't before. Mateo can talk about getting more involved in stadium partnerships, for example.
Yeah.
So I think we're able to support them in new and interesting ways where traditional real estate functions might move quite slow and be hyper-focused on legacy thinking, traditional builds, long turnaround times, and that's just the nature of real estate.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Mateo? I follow Mateo on Instagram, and it's sometimes horrible to see him. He was at the F1 the other day, and I'm like, we need to talk about that. You're enabling space at the F1, Mateo. What's going on?
I'm supporting unlocking the business opportunity.
Yes, I understand.
Through the use of space. No, I think what Vincent said, we're aligned on everything. I think another layer for LA in particular is how the business is activating the space. Because LA is a big market for our Square team, are they going to be bringing in sellers for fireside chats? We have a big media presence here. Our partners sit down the freeway. We can now, they can come to our space versus us going to their space. So I think adding on to the employee use is one component. Now it's business activations as well, because how we think about real estate decisions is the employee experience is a top priority, but now how can we support the business's priorities as well through the use of space, which ties into all the other partnerships we're doing. I think in terms of success, if it just really depends. If we fit the space and it's at 100% capacity, we can just keep the space, go direct with the landlord. If we start seeing overcapacity, then that triggers us to go on a search for a dedicated space that can accommodate that overflow. And then on the contrary, if we see that we're not getting utilization, we can quickly pivot, maybe take on a smaller footprint, or just go back to on-demand usage. It really depends, but I think that's for this specific pilot. Beyond just LA, this has opened up the door across the globe, essentially, where if the business decides that they want to double down in a specific city, we now know that we can activate relatively quickly to support that. And so if the next big city is in the middle of the country, we can pop in to the middle of the country and open up that opportunity for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this isn't necessarily the topic of today and like what's been going on in here. This is a really extremely interesting project, but there's been other areas where we've been able to support Block in Dublin, for example, where you were in between space. And do you want to tell us a little about that reactivity? That is just the reality of being in a real estate function in a business, is that you are between. Any kind of change throws up some kind of chaos. You were able to react to that pretty effectively.
I think the key component of long-term book is, like, Vincent and I have always been proponents of on-demand and pivoting our established markets to on-demand platforms if we don't see that the spaces that we currently had were at utilization metrics. But then we ran into a few issues this year across our portfolio with leasing expirations not aligning with our relocations. And so originally there was an issue in Toronto where our serviced office was terminating earlier than our space was ready. So we had to pivot and figure out what we were going to do there. And then that's when the inception of long-term booking came to our face. From there, we're relocating to another space in Dublin, and our existing office was going through extensive external furnishings. It got to the point where we could no longer operate out of the space, and there was health hazards, electricity wasn't working, our equipment was overheating. And so being able to pivot in a blink of an eye to take a long-term book and move our team into somewhere that's still operationable was unheard of, especially in how quickly we did it. I think we identified a location, and a week later we were moving in and putting in our own furniture.
Yeah. It's been great to work with you folks on. We've been building out the product to do that, and it's been good to see it actually add a ton of value for these things. One element that we kind of discussed previously was how you engaged with Amrita, the CFO at Block, who's obviously a major stakeholder in all this, and how that differed with this project going back to LA. What was that experience like, bringing data to the table, bringing some precedent other than just hiring strategy? There's some precedent in actual behavior. How did that change the conversation on budget and buy-in from a financial perspective?
I think that for Amrita, she's data-driven, and so we have to justify the decisions we're making, especially when they come with a significant cost. With long-term booking, well, I guess going before long-term booking, with the data that we had from on-demand, we were able to pick our location strategy. So knowing that we're making an informed decision in a very difficult city was, one, going to check off that we were doing our homework on, are we making the right decision on location? And then the second component is being able to speak on how many people use our spaces or have been using spaces in LA, so that we had a quantifiable metric that said, in the last 9 months, there's been 2,000 employees that have booked at desk at least once. And then we've also seen that out of all of those employees, there's been 60 plus teams gathering in the city in specific locations. And that information was what gave her the confidence that, all right, we need to invest in a space here. And then the long-term booking is us showing that we're committing to the employees, finding them space, but we're also remaining hyper flexible so that if we do need to pivot, or if it's not a success, we can quickly pull back, and we're not investing in year-long commitments that the only way out is through subleasing or potential termination clauses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting to see that be actually leveraged, in that conversation, to go from hyper flexible to midterm kind of fixed without the stigma of, we're in here for 7 years, Amrita we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Good luck. To wrap up, do you want to give us a hot take on where you think this is going for blog, and how you think it's going to evolve in LA? I don't think that was in our planned question, so apologies for throwing that on you, but we're doing it now. Come on.
Even we're not up and running yet. Like,
Yeah.
clearly we're still setting up, but I feel a lot of energy and excitement from the employees. So I'm slightly on the nervous side that it's going to be hyper successful, and we're going to have to pivot in an expansion mode.
Yeah.
Just seeing, like, in our Slack channels and through emails, there's a lot of energy around the office space opening. We're already seeing a surge of requests to host events within the space. So that makes me think it's going to be successful. But you never know.
Never know. What were you, Vincent? What's your hot take?
Generally, I don't know if it's that spicy of a take. I'm more of an optimist myself as well. I
Yeah.
do think that LA specifically will be pretty well utilized. I think there is that energy that Mateo mentioned. I'm also hopeful that this is the gateway to do this in more cities. LA is the test pilot here for this whole new framework. And I think if it proves successful, the next logical step is to start looking into the next largest density of employees and interest and potential investment in that specific market as the target city for expansion. So I'm hoping we're in the expansion phase now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're already engaged with this, the landlord, so an existing dialogue. So it's, balls are already in motion for, okay, what is available way ahead of when that might happen, which is excellent. So great. Guys, thank you so much for having us here and for running through how this has been evolving. It's been great working with you.
Same.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great. We're done.
Cut.